My name is Lori Sawatsky. I am the Executive Director of South Central Immigrant Services, located in Winkler. The Provincial Nominee Program, it is part of the economic strategy for Manitoba to bring a certain amount of people into Manitoba to fill labor force needs. So that's an important piece of the immigration process to Manitoba. It's that employment fit, because if people are not successfully employed, it's difficult for them to settle. The program has, various categories where you need to achieve a certain amount of points. And so language is one, and what the skills that Manitoba is looking for is another one, et cetera, et cetera. And in 2006, they planned on the economic strategy was, as a population strategy, I guess, was to look at immigration, go through the PNP, and have 10,000 people move here in 1 year. And I believe they were just short, but the plan was over 10 years to 2016 to increase the number by 1,000 every year, so that by 2016, 20,000 people would be moving to Manitoba from other countries. There is a cap of 5,000 for Manitoba, so I think they always work with the federal government to see if they can increase it or decrease, etc. Well, they never want to decrease it.
This whole movement started with, rural businesses in the area, and specifically in Winkler, were experiencing a tremendous growth in business, and they needed more people. And the area did not have enough qualified people or tradespeople to help them grow the business.
The initial wave became out of a project through the Winkler and District Chamber of Commerce in partnership with the Manitoba Provincial Nominee Program to try to solve what was a challenge to fulfill the labor market needs here. So it turned out the timing was really, really good. The Provincial Nominee Program was trying to reestablish from a program that had been in the past called Manitoba Advantage. And they were looking to pilot a project. So the pilot project began in Winkler, and it became known as the Winkler Immigration Initiative. And so community people together, host families were brought to help the newcomers get settled, and that first 50 families arrived, and very shortly thereafter, and everyone had jobs, and very shortly thereafter, settlement workers were hired to also sort of facilitate the settlement.
And at that time, immigration service provider, Star 7, started helping with this immigration process. And Star 7 started to go to Germany on a recruitment, so to speak, recruitment tours to highlight the area, to highlight the jobs in the area, to show what Winkler and Morden and Altona sort of is about. And people started coming, visiting, liking what they see, and they started to move because they could find jobs, they could settle.
My name is Lisa Kraft, and I work for South Central Immigrant Services as a settlement worker. I was born in Russia. When I was 2 years old, we moved to Kazakhstan, and 10 years later we moved to Germany, and 15 years Germany. So we lived in North Bavaria in Bad Kissingen. It was a very, very beautiful city and everything, and my parents are there, and my grandparents and my sister. And well, I was working as a customer manager in a big store, and yeah, I had 2 kids there. I always wanted to move somewhere else. Yeah, and we were looking around where Australia or Canada. And I don't know why I decided I kind of liked the winter as well. So we decided to move to Canada, but I didn't know. A friend of mine told me about the program in Manitoba. So we came here through Manitoba Provincial Nominee Program, and I like it here, so I just stayed here.
I moved here, married, it's pretty much 1 month before we moved to Canada. Me and my wife got married, and we moved here as a new family. and started our family here. We have 2 kids, 2 girls that were both born here. They're now 11 and 14, and we love the area and love the people. It was very easy to integrate because, as I was saying, there's lots of the same. The first language spoken, which is Low German in the area, mostly is the same language we speak as well as the very first language. Our kids fit very good in school, society, church. People were very friendly, welcoming. So it was the integration process was extremely easy, and I think we found what we were looking for. My family, we were always ethnic Germans, because a part of a few countries where you can immigrate to, like US, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and so forth and so on, you are who you are. You could be 5th, 7th, 8th generation German born in Russia, but it doesn't mean because you're born in Russia, you're Russian. So my parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and on and on and on for the last, I don't know, 6, 7 generations, we were all Germans, ethnic Germans. Like my dad's passport in Russia was a Russian passport, says nationality German. My mom's too. So we were always ethnic Germans, but we were not, like during the communist era from 1917 or whatever, till 1990 effectively, we were not able to move back or to go to visit even and stuff, you know, like Germany. So when the Iron Curtain fell and people were allowed to leave the country because of the hardship that the Mennonites have experienced under communism for the prosecution of faith and on and on and on, there was a very, almost a logical step. It was almost an eager step. As soon as the wall fell, people moved out as soon as they could, because they had no idea if maybe the wall would be built up again and people would not allow to leave. Because as Germans, and specifically Mennonites, especially if you can imagine after World War II, being a German, when in your passport it says you're a German. After World War II and atrocities that happened in Germany and around the world from the World War II, people, ethnic Russians, were not necessarily too kind on us. So it was a logical choice to move out as soon as the wall opened up.
Well, I'm Christine Freys, and I work for Regional Connections, and I'm the integration worker. We moved in September of 2009. Yeah, we lived in Russia for many, many generations, and then I think my dad told me Second World War, there was a little bit of a persecution for German people living in Russia. So Russian people weren't very welcoming of the German people, even though they integrated a lot. Lots of the German people actually didn't speak German anymore, just like my dad. He couldn't speak any German when he moved to Germany, so he learned it all in Germany. They were Germans. Generations ago, we were always living in Germany, and then our ancestors moved to Russia, but they always kept their German ancestry, their German passport. Everything was German. They just lived in Russia. And then we lived there for a very long time. And then all my relatives decided to move to Germany together. But I wasn't born yet when that all happened. So I was born in Germany in 1992.
There was a planned resettlement process for Germany to bring people back into the fold, and a very careful settlement plan for how they did that. Training, with retraining for jobs, language training for people, putting the kids into school, the spouses having language training as well. And so that year-long sort of resettlement process, and then off to employment. But I think what happened with some of them is, after going through that process, finding that they were being placed into a community that they didn't necessarily have any connections to, and might be far, far away from family and friends. And that's, so then looking beyond, where else can we go where we can be together? And have that freedom, I think, to make that decision.
Well, I was kind of hesitant because, you know, I was 16 years old and I have all my friends over there, and I was going to do my Abitur, and my sister was more reserved. She really didn't want to go, but now she's glad to be here. But I was 16 years old. I thought, well, let's move. Let's check it out. You know, young.
The Soviet Union fell apart and everything just went crazy. And of course, because we have German roots, they decided to move to Germany. I really didn't like to live in there where I was. It was a little bit more hate, I would say, against everything what comes from another country kind of thing. So I was thrilled and I couldn't wait to move. So yeah, we are Christian, but it's not like it's very religious here. Like our area is very religious, but yeah, I'm just yeah, it's good. Mm-hmm. Oh, I can never say forever because of my personality. Who knows? But I'm 100% sure that I'm gonna stay in Canada. That's for sure. Yeah. It is a place which I just love, but I'm not thinking about moving there. It's Thunder Bay. I just love that place. North Ontario is just can't stay away from there. They have like Thunder Bay, and the one side they have a waterfall, and the other side this sleeping giant and the huge lake and everything. It's just beautiful. That's pretty much, yeah. It's just a beautiful place. Well, I really think we're all different, and we all see it from different perspectives. Just yesterday, I had a client in my office. She, after 7 years living here, she's planning on going back to Germany. And I'm just wondering why. And then she said that, nothing to do here. It's boring here. And, I've been here just as long as she was, and I'm not bored at all. I always have something to do. We go to the concerts, we go to the ballet. And yes, we have to drive to Winnipeg, but who cares? It's just, and, well, we're all different. I'm thinking if you have good friends here, if you have some kind of a family here, and you have your good job and everything, then you feel whatever, you can live in the desert Sahara and you will feel great. So I'm thinking that's the most important part, to have your family and friends around you.
Mein Name ist Christian Kant. Ich lebe hier in Manitoba, Winkler. Lebe hier als Lehrer für Klarinette, Saxophon, Klavier, Blockflöte und Akustikgitarre. Und immer noch arbeite ich als Busfahrer, verdiene mir habe einen Nebenverdienst, und ja, dies tue ich seit 2011 im September habe ich hier, im August bin ich hierher gekommen und habe so langsam mir Schüler aufgebaut. Im Augenblick habe ich so ungefähr um die 30 Schüler.
It was the first couple of months, it was hard, especially because my dad didn't find any employment for the first 6 months, so we were kind of very pressured. The English was very... it was weird to not talk your mother tongue anymore. And once I found employment, I started working part-time at the Modern Co-op here in March. Like, we moved in September, and then 5 or 6 months later I found employment, and then it was a bit easier for me to integrate. But because there were so many German-speaking people in high school, it was hard to kind of step out of your comfort zone, because in order to learn a language you really have to consciously tell yourself, I'm only going to talk with Canadians, with English native speaking people, and not go to what I feel comfortable with, like always going with the German group. So that's what I did for the first couple of months. And there were embarrassing moments, because if you don't speak English fluently and clearly, and it takes you longer to formulate a sentence, some Canadians are they're not as patient with you. So sometimes it was a bit embarrassing. When I made mistakes, it was embarrassing, but you know, there were Canadians who were very welcoming, and they knew that I needed that training. So my siblings, they were 6 years old when we moved, so they didn't have any trouble. They learned the language in 6 months fluently, and now they have trouble talking German. And my parents are They're integrated. They're good. They don't want to move back and they don't want to go visit even. They want to stay in Canada, so.
My daughter, sure, she's 9. She tries to learn and she tries to talk in Russian. German, her German is wonderful. My son is a teenager. I try to speak German to them, but I just realized when my mom came over in July last year, and she doesn't speak any English, and of course they needed to switch to German completely with her. It was so tough for them. They even asked me, Mom, please could you just interpret for us, because it's just so hard. But we try. I try to even teach them some Russian and everything so that they, but yeah, it's hard. They see that in the future they can really have even a better job to have all those languages. It's just a gift for you. Yeah. Well, as a teenager, it's hard to see any value in everything, but yeah. I'm thinking I'm a role model for them, because I came here in 3 years, I didn't speak any English, and 3 years later, because of my two, like German and Russian, I got this job, and they see that it is a very good job.
My name is Harry Zahn. I'm working for South Central Immigrant Services, and the work I'm doing is basically help people who are new to the country to settle successfully in the area. I lived in West Germany at that time. Now it's united, but it was in Rheinland-Pfalz, in the city of Neuwied, on the outskirts, in a village called Dernbach. And I like the country life a little bit more than the city life, so it's in the Westerwald, which is a beautiful forest again. Yeah, it's a beautiful place. I was an immigrant to Germany as well. See, my parents are from the Ukraine. No, I should say maybe they are Germans. Born in the Ukraine. They were immigrants themselves, but also they were deportees during the Second World War. So they were uprooted from their place of where they lived and put in concentration camps or in gulags in other places, and they were actually then released in 1953. Well, then they met, got married, had me. But I think it's when they moved to Germany, I got kind of a little bug. I kind of infected with moving. So I thought to myself, Germany might not be my last place to stay. And I like traveling, and I thought I'll try out some more. The first time I came to Canada, it's been for me in 1986 to 87. I always wanted to immigrate to a different country, so I was trying out countries like Canada, and then the following year it should have been Australia. You know? So I found out about MCC and IMO, which is International Mennonite Organization. They have a program that sponsors students for 1 year, and they put them in different work environments. And I thought, well, this is the opportunity I can take. So and I took the opportunity. So, and one of the benefits I thought is it will teach me a new language as well, because my English was not good at that time. And I ended up in Alberta on a farm, which I enjoyed, kind of, but it didn't give me much exposure to talk, to learn English. I was trying to get any kind of an opportunity to go to the town and pick up some classes, and I was successful with that. After half a year, I was assigned to a place close to Kitchener-Waterloo in New Hamburg, which turned out to be a very good place for me, because I was staying with people. They were hosting me, and the woman happened to be a teacher as well, so she taught me to speak English properly. So that was my 1 year of exposure.
Das war waren mehrere Gründe. Ich habe natürlich mit meiner Frau letztendlich entschieden. Und Ich muss vorausschicken, dass unsere Schwiegermutter, sie lebt mittlerweile gar nicht mehr, sie ist hier zuerst nach Kanada übergesiedelt und sie hatte eine Vision, eine Vision, wir als Großfamilie, wir werden nach Kanada gehen. Aber das hat sie eigentlich nur mal so erzählt. Wir hatten keinen großen Familienrat und sie hat Weisung gegeben, wir werden nach Kanada gehen. Nein, das gab es nie. Aber das kam so durch. Sie hat das mal so erzählt. Und seitdem aber auch nie, gab es nie irgendwie Gespräche mit der Schwiegermutter und uns. Aber es war zu sehen, dass rundherum die Schwiegerkinder, also nicht die eigenen Kinder, sondern die Schwiegerkinder, das Bedürfnis hatten, nach Kanada auszuwandern. Und also ich fand das sehr interessant. Und meine Frau hat mich Jahre zuvor mal gefragt, kannst du dir vorstellen, nach Kanada auszuwandern? Und ich sagte, warum? Warum? Ich hatte einen sehr guten Job, eine sehr gute Arbeit in Hannover, wo wir herkommen, als Lehrer. Und da gab es für mich gar keinen Grund. Aber es hat sich bei mir verändert. Und wir haben über verschiedene Aspekte nachgedacht, wie wir sind Christen, wie wir hier in Kanada leben könnten, unsere Erwartungen. Wir hatten also unsere Erwartung an Kanada, ne, als Christen, und wie kann man als Christ in Kanada leben, so. Und wir haben hier in Deutschland eine große Herausforderung mit den Moslems, mit dem Islam. Das ist eine sehr große Herausforderung. Kanada hat das auch. Nicht in dem Maße, in dem es Deutschland hat. Ja, wir haben es in viel größerem Maße, zumal eben Deutschland viel kleiner ist, aber wir sind viel dichter an Nahen Osten, ja, Türkei und diese arabischen Länder als Kanada. So kommen diese Leute eben zu uns und beeinflussen unser System, nicht? Und das ist also nicht mehr unbedingt nur nehmen wir nicht unbedingt mehr als multikulturell auf und sagen, schön, eine andere Kultur, es bereichert, es ist wunderschön, sondern es ist mehr so, dass sich die anderen zurückziehen müssen und sagen müssen, oh, du darfst wohl deinen islamischen Glauben, das darfst du vertreten, aber ich darf eigentlich meine Ansichten nicht so öffentlich machen. Und das war schon ein Grund, weshalb wir gesagt haben, lass es uns wagen, ja.
I liked it so much in Canada that I decided to immigrate to Canada. I dropped the idea of going to Australia and actually signed up for some studies in Winnipeg. I did that with the purpose of enhancing to get some more credit in my studies, but in the meanwhile time to be able to apply from the United States with my application for immigration, but I was turned down. So that was a kind of that was my first try to immigrate to Canada. I did it again, I think, in '94, and one usually gets a kind of a formal letter that states, you're not eligible at this time, we don't think you will be successful in immigration, and so I did not pursue it for another probably 8 years. I applied for the PMP program, and I was successful with that. So my family, my wife and 3 kids, we were able to move to Winkler in 2005. I had a job offer as a bricklayer, and I did that for some time, and then I moved on from there. So this is a little bit about my attempts to come to Canada and to make my dream work for me. From my mother's side, there were immigrants from Germany to the Ukraine in the 18th century. There was a settlement going on under the Queen Catherine, and she did that. And from my father's side, I think in 1870s, around that, they were moving into the Ukraine as well. They were born both in the Ukraine. But when the German army advanced and took parts of the country over, and eventually lost the war because of the Russians advancing on them, they had to flee to mainland or heartland Germany. My father was captured as a child already in Poland and deported. My mother didn't make it, well, she made it to Berlin, but it was the Russian sector, so they deported her as well. Some of my other relatives, they were successful. They could stay in Germany. They were on the American side, but most of them had to be deported, or they deported them. 1975, we applied for immigration, and it actually worked out very well from the very first time. There was a window of opportunity for many. I would say a lot of Jewish people, a lot of German people were able to immigrate during that time, and then it stopped for a while again. Then it started again, I think, in the end 80s and 90s. But we were among the first ones to leave Russia. West Germany, correct. I think there was some international pressure. I'm not too sure about the politics at that time, but as I was told by my father, I think the Jewish community tried to get a lot of Jewish people out of Russia. And a lot of Germans saw that too, and they jumped on the same train, so to say, and then were able to immigrate too. I think during that time, about 50,000 people immigrated to Germany. And then, well, it then eventually ceased to be in that great numbers anymore.
Ein weiterer Grund war für mich persönlich, war die Sprache. Ich habe, bevor wir nach Kanada gingen, also 12 Jahre, 13 Jahre vorher, hatte ich begonnen, meine Englischbibel zu lesen. Vor und zurück. So jeden Tag ungefähr 1-2 Kapitel. Und ja, ich habe auch Kassetten mir beschafft und so, dann habe ich das angehört und dann habe ich auch gebetet, Gott, was hast du damit vor? Was soll das werden? Ja. Und als das dann die Frage mit Kanada immer näher kam und an Bedeutung zunahm, ja, dann wurde es irgendwie immer klarer, wir werden nach Kanada gehen. Und der erste Anfang hier in Kanada war insofern auch, das war schon etwas Beeindruckendes, eine ganz andere Kultur, was wohl auch damit zusammenhängen mag, dass wir hier in Winkler leben. Das ist ganz anders als Hannover, wo ich herkomme. Ja, Hannover ist eine große Stadt. Auch es ist nicht so wie Winkler. Winkler ist auch es ist ganz anders als Hannover. Und das ist sehr interessant so, ja. Und so war der erste Anfang schon hier, es war ganz neu alles, ja. Und aber auch wir lieben die Sonnenscheintage hier. Es gibt so viel Sonnenschein. Jemand sagte, hier in Winkler gibt es die meisten Sonnenscheintage von ganz Kanada. Ich weiß nicht, ob das jemand anders noch bestätigen kann. Auf jeden Fall, das war, was wir gehört haben. Aber was wir auch erleben hier, es gibt viel Sonne.